but we get up.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Hometown Friends, where we explore our most foundational friendships. My next guests are from the same hometown, but they did not become friends until pretty recently and would not likely be connected unless they were introduced by a mutual friend. Dave Tom and Owen Miyoshi were introduced to each other on a bicycle by a guy named Joe Shelbred, a man who coached hockey with Dave long ago and who was in the same high school jazz band with Owen. In this interview, you'll hear Dave and Owen describe how they became very close friends in a short amount of time, and even feeling like they've known each other forever. This phenomenon occurs for many reasons and is a common experience for people who just click or have similar interests and values. These guys have experienced something that many hometown friends experience, which is that when you come from the same place and you identify with the same values and social mores of that place, a loose connection or a new friendship can become extremely significant very quickly. Having a mutual friend allows for a new friendship to begin and progress much faster because we trust that the relationship has been vetted. As extremely social animals, we as humans are designed to constantly analyze the social situations that we're in and the ways in which we are similar or different from others. And this analysis often contributes to the feelings of familiarity, which lead us to feeling more comfortable around these new relationships. I think you'll see that in this interview. Although Owen is gay and a professional musician, and Dave is straight, married with children, with a background in finance, they bond over a shared passion for cycling, coffee, and music. And you'll hear how they share their lives by spending multiple hours at a time riding long distances and training together, and often have deep and personal conversations riding side by side. The respect for each other and the appreciation for the differences is a significant factor in their closeness, and it has a lot to do with coming from the same hometown. So although they did not grow up together or meet in grade school or high school like many hometown friends, their friendship is a great example of the way that our tribal mentality contributes to the creating solid and meaningful connections. I really enjoyed listening to these guys tell us about their different personal stories and the ways that they connect over giving back to their communities and their search for the perfect cup of joe. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dave and Owen. Welcome to the Hometown Friends podcast, Owen Miyoshi and David Tom. You guys are some of my hometown friends, but I think we have very loose connections with each other. I actually know you guys more from other people than I think I know you personally. I've certainly rode with you many times. We're all cyclists, and so I thought to have you guys on, but I'm curious about sort of your relationship and how you guys know each other and how far it goes back. And I know it's pretty current. So tell me a little bit about your relationship. How are you guys friends?
So the crazy thing is, so when I started, I met Dave Tom through Jode Shelbred. And then I was telling my sisters that I was riding with this guy, David Tom, that was at Berkeley High. My sister was like, wait, his sister's Dara Tom, the other Tom. The other Dara. There were two Daras at Berkeley. I had Dara Burke and Dara Tom. So my sisters remembered Dara Tom really well, and I was like, that's a trip. And then Dave and I got to be really good friends during the cycling through Jode. But I had to be, what was it? I had to be vetted, right, in order to ride with David.
Right. Not for your riding skill, but for your personality.
Right.
You can't spend 5 hours with a guy and not like him. That's what it comes down to.
That's a good point.
Because we met through,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying we just met through Jode, who I've known forever through ice hockey and music and the music scene as well.
Right. So then with the music scene, then David knows all these people that I knew. So there's this weird musical connection along with the cycling, and Jode and I met through music at Berkeley High. So and cycling reconnected us, which connected me to David.
Wow. So that's like a loose. So you didn't know each other prior to how many years ago?
Like what, maybe 6 years ago? I don't know. Probably about 6 years on. Somewhere in there, right? Somewhere in the 4 to 6 year time frame. I mean, it's all kind of a blur, truthfully, with COVID. It kind of threw a wrench into a lot of stuff.
Right.
Because that's a 2 year span right there. Where oddly enough, we actually saw each other more because everybody was shut down, but we could still cycle together because it's outdoors. Right. So we actually spent more time together during COVID, which is interesting.
Yeah, without cycling friends during COVID, I don't know what I would have done. You know, being outside 6 feet apart, riding up a hill, getting my exercise, man. Well, interestingly for you guys, you have sort of all these loose connections, but all these tentacles that sort of lead you to each other. So music and cycling all sort of coalesces to have your friendship be so current.
Right. Yeah. You know, and I had heard about Owen years ago, but I was trying to avoid him because I heard all these bad things about him. And so I was like, that's one guy I don't want to cross paths with because, you know, it might just kind of end up in a bad way. It never ends well with guys like Owen. So then I finally meet Owen and I was like, oh man, all those bad things about you, they were true. No. So we just we really hit it off because we had, oddly enough, the other thing is we have a similar love for coffee. Because I grew up in the coffee business and he's just passionate about it. And he's really become an aficionado. And I just love good coffee. And I knew Owen was a good guy. Well, actually, my wife said Owen's a great guy when he, for one Christmas, gave us some freshly roasted coffee. And she's like, nice. Oh, I like this guy. She hadn't even met Owen yet, but she's like, oh, fresh coffee. I like Owen.
That's awesome. How did you grow up in the coffee business? What's that about? I didn't know that.
So, yeah, when we were at Berkeley High, I was actually working at Espresso Roma, the one on College, and Bancroft, Durant and College right there. And I was just a busboy, but I worked there all through college but I opened stores in Oregon and Seattle when I was at University of Washington. So I became the area manager for all 30 stores, and I just learned the coffee business through osmosis, really, and just being involved in it. I mean, back in high school, we were drinking espresso and lattes and everything else, stuff that these days, you know, everybody thinks is, I don't know, they don't let kids drink a lot of caffeine these days, actually, you know?
True.
Yeah. Like, no. You know, NICA, right? They have a no caffeine rule for the high school kids.
That's true. Definitely on the mountain biking team, you're not allowed to drink caffeine before a race. That's for sure. Right.
Exactly. And we were drinking literally espressos after school in the cafes, trying to act like we were sophisticated and erudite and college age, yet we were in, ninth grade.
Totally. How did you become passionate about coffee, Owen? Just drinking it?
I didn't start drinking coffee till out of high school. I got a job, and I was a courier for a title insurance company. Right there, where on Hopkins, where there's still a real estate office there, but it was Northwestern Title, and I was the courier. So they're like, "Go get us coffee," and so I get coffee. Then I get myself a coffee. I was like, "Oh, it's nasty," but then I grew to love it was always Pete's Coffee, and then my parents loved Pete's Coffee. But then I just have been on this journey of trying to make the greatest cup of coffee, which led to my older sister, giving me a home roasting kit. And then through cycling, with David, I learned, there's espressos. Like I knew about espressos, but I didn't drink them. And then through cycling, I became an espresso drinker. And then so I got an espresso machine.
Awesome.
Roast my own beans and do my own espressos. But I'm still working on the perfect cup. It takes a lot.
Amazing.
Owen's one of those guys that goes all in on something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you gotta love it and respect it. It's great because so many people don't have that passion for anything, really. Right. But
well, that's really interesting that you say that, because what I know about both of you guys, and again, it's loose ties. So I'm actually curious if you can kind of introduce us to yourselves, let us know what you do now. But what I know about both of you guys are you're very passionate about a few things. And the one area that we overlap is certainly cycling. But I'm curious, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you currently do, not necessarily for a living, but like what keeps you engaged in your life right now.
Go ahead, Owen. You can start.
Well, cycling is a it was before the pandemic, but the pandemic really kicked it into high gear. Like we had done, me, Jode and Jesse had done that NICA, a fundraising thing out of, Fairfax.
Yeah.
And I kind of killed myself. I'd already met Freddie Rodriguez, and I was chasing all the teenagers, as I always do on the bike. And I basically died out in Tamales Bay. And I mean, I completely bonked. It was the major, and I never got over that bonk. Even in March of 2020, was it? Yeah, March 2020. I still couldn't. I'm like reviewing all my Strava files. Like all the notes were like, body still hasn't come back. So I was hanging out with David. The pandemic had hit. So Jode and I were riding. We're out at David's place, and I was like, "Man, when is Freddie gonna start coaching?" He's like, "Oh, he is." And so I contacted him, and then it really got crazy. But I biked when I was in middle school at King. Jack Ball had the cycling class, and so that's where it got started. And then reconnecting with Jode and then David, but the pandemic really did it, and having a coach and learning how to ride. And now it's just a part of my being. Like it helps me survive the long days being a musician, and they tie in really well together. You know, like when we talk about Zone 2, it's just easy on the brass playing, and when it's Zone 5, trumpet playing's about, you know, triple forte. You know, you can only sustain it for how long. So they work really well together. But cycling has just turned into my, it's just such a real passion, and it really keeps me going. The energy is mostly all from cycling. I have 2 espressos a day, except for I had 3 today because David bought me an espresso earlier.
So had to get him fired up.
Yeah.
So you are a daily road biker right now, Owen, correct? And that's really been your passion. So I didn't know that there was actually a cycling class at Berkeley High?
No, at King Junior High.
At King Junior High.
Did you ever know Mr. Ball? Did you guys both know Mr. Ball? Jack Ball?
I knew Mr. Ball. He was my gymnastics teacher. And I was in the cross country club. He was a runner. We ran with him every day after school.
Yeah, he was like one of those PE teachers that just was a real athlete. And right. So, and he I don't know if mine was the first, because I think it was 7th or 8th grade. And I don't know if that was when the class was started, but there was a cycling class. It would teach you the rules of the road. We go out and do bike rides. That part of the class was to get on our bikes and go tool around Berkeley. And he'd, you know, make us stop at stop signs. One time we didn't, and the cop pulled it. There was a cop there and pulled us over. And Mr. Ball's like, you know, we got to stop at the stop signs. Is what happened. You know, so it's kind of cool. And then my parents bought me a bike, and then it was really off crazy. I did have a friend at Berkeley High. I don't know if you knew Aaron Feldman.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
He was a cycling guy, and he was a real funny guy, and I like being around funny people. And he was in some of my classes at Berkeley High, and he was just cracking me up. We're gonna have a cat bomb here, sorry. And and so he and I would start riding together, and he really wanted to go do the Tour de France. And so we joined the BBC, and we were riding with the BBC, and I was cracking all the time. I didn't know how to ride. I mean, I knew how to ride a bike. I didn't know anything about zones. I don't know what was going on in the 80s with zones, but I was cramping. I was just dying on every ride. And King, which is what, King Middle School now. Now it's, when we were there, as King Junior High.
Yeah. There was a picture. I've seen a picture of you in a cycling hat at Berkeley High with your leg over a bike. But that's the only picture I've ever seen of you early days of on a bike.
I had some of the girls at Berkeley High nickname me Legs. There is Legs.
Nice.
I just biked everywhere. I mean, it's just my trumpet was on my back, still kind of like today.
Forrest Gump. He's the Forrest Gump of bicycling. But I think for Owen too, you know, when he refound cycling, it was a little bit before he had been cycling for maybe a year or two before we connected via Jode on a ride. And Jode said, "Hey, can I bring this guy? I've been riding with him, and I've been trying to help him and with the Zone 2 concept and stuff like that." But also, up until that point, Owen, you had lost, 40 pounds maybe?
Oh, since that pounds? Time? Yeah. I was like
when I first met you, and then you lost even more since I met you.
Yeah. So
there's just the health benefit of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? That's totally healthy. I mean, that's kind of what is part of the obsession, is just trying to stay healthy as we get a little older, you know. Just a little older, not a lot older, just a little older.
Yeah.
But yeah, the health. I mean, I was in 2000. 2009, I was 180 pounds. And then
wow.
I reconnected with Jode, and through what we thought was zone 2, I got down to like 165, and I couldn't get any lower. And then Jeff Lipton said, well, maybe that's your given weight. I was like, that's bullshit. That's just like, I did not accept that 165 was my weight. But I couldn't get losing any more weight. So it was, connecting with David and learning more about zone 2. And then David and Jode introduced me into Fast Freddy. And then he did my blood work, and then we got in the right zones. And then the weight just started pouring off. Like, people thought I was sick because so much weight came off so fast. And it was all healthy, all through, with professional, help and that sort of thing. So
and you're a professional musician, right?
Yeah, so I'm a professional classically trained classical trumpet player, and went through all the Berkeley schools, Berkeley High, played in the jazz bands, in the jazz ensemble where I met Jode, played in all the youth orchestras in the Bay Area, and then went to college and failed miserably at the first stab. I went to SF State for a couple of years and flunked out. Took a year off, and then went to a small private school, the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And then that's where things started really, you get the right teacher, get around the right people. And then that took off. And then there's been a lot of trials and tribulations I don't know we want to get into, but there were a lot of injuries that I've sustained over in college and then over my professional career. So
yeah. Well, we should come back to that. The one thing that I did want to add is that you also teach at Berkeley High, right?
Right, yeah. So I was brought back to Berkeley High in the early 2000s, just with the band and orchestra program. And I was that was when I was 180 pounds. I was, if I'll say it, I was a bit of an alcoholic. So I was going through a bottle of whiskey a week. And so I had a real hard time waking up and so the band director was like, let's just kind of take a pause,
Right.
And then we fast forward to 2010, 11. Sarah Klein had been hired, and she's a Berkeley High graduate, and she rehired all these new coaches. Josh Jones was still there, but everybody else got fired, and she brought in new people. And so and then I got reconnected with the band program. So I do there are 8 bands now at Berkeley High.
Wow.
And so I go there twice a week, Tuesday mornings and all day Wednesdays, to handle all the bands. I just coach all the trumpet players for all the bands amazing. So jazz and classical. And it's super fun. It's nice to give back.
Yeah.
See the progress, like, the building's been remodeled. Building, and they're starting on the community theater now and the little theater.
Hell yeah.
Some more upgrades thanks to us Berkeley citizens that our taxes. Prop 13.
No doubt.
Right.
Well, it sounds like you have a busy life. I love the fact that you are giving back, and I love the hometown hookup of the Sarah Klein connection, which is definitely another episode to have, is the hometown hookup and the loose connections that we all have to many people, or if we don't know them, we know somebody who knows them, kind of like how Jode hooked you guys up. Yeah. Dave, tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days. And I know that you are connected to one of our valued pros in the Bay Area, Freddie Rodriguez. But tell us a little bit about what you do currently.
So my passion, which is current, but also something I've been passionate about basically since I was a kid, is coaching youth sports. Yeah. So I've coached high level, all levels of ice hockey in Berkeley before I moved to Oakland. After I got out of college, I played college ice hockey. And then I coached mountain biking. I started the Oakland composite team back when it was just, it wasn't NICA. NICA didn't exist at the time.
Right.
And I've coached youth soccer, and now I'm coaching high school basketball for one of the top programs in Northern California out here in Danville. And so my thing is, like, I grew up really poor. We had nothing. But I didn't know that, right? But I found out as an adult that when we were living in the flats down in Berkeley until I was 10, I knew we were living in my Chinese grandmother's house. It was a duplex. But what I did know, because my parents were divorced, was that my father's sisters were trying to get us kicked out from upstairs where we lived. And my Chinese grandmother actually liked my mom more than she liked her own kids. So she let us stay there for free a lot of the time because my mother couldn't afford to pay the rent.
Wow.
And then when we were 10, we moved to a house in Berkeley, up in the Berkeley Hills. And we of course we're kids, so we don't know this. I'm 10. But the family that owned essentially the entire block, almost the entire block, was a wealthy family from Piedmont. And they were selling off the houses, but very cheaply, and to people who had families. They wanted to create a community. Amazing. And so they sold one of the houses to my mother, which she still lives in to this day. I was just over there this morning, and that's why I had coffee with Owen, because he's in Berkeley. And then I found out as an adult that there were years when my mother couldn't even make the mortgage payment, but they were financing the purchases. So unlike a bank, they didn't demand payment. Wow. So my mom did actually have to make a payment to them for 4 years while she struggled raising 4 of us. And we didn't know any of this stuff, right? And then then I think back on it, when we moved into that house, it needed a lot of work because it's an old house. For the first month, the house was a beehive of adults. All my mom's friends and associates and things like that were all helping fix the house up. But again, we're kids. We're just sort of there. Oh, this is great. Everybody's over all the time, you know? They're bringing furniture. They're building stuff. They're painting the house. And it was really what you would just call an old-fashioned barn raising, right? The community, my mom's community chipped in. All of her family and, my uncles and aunts and then her friends. And so then when I learned all this stuff as an adult, I was already involved in philanthropy. And in Berkeley High, I was president of the Key Club for 2 years, which is all philanthropic. But then I realized I have to continue to give back to the community somehow. You can't just take, right? And I got involved in nonprofit housing really while I was in college, because I was working in finance in the summers in internships at an investment bank in San Francisco. And I got involved with a nonprofit called Resources for Community Development in Berkeley, which is still in existence today. And we developed low-income housing. Because in my world, I look back on it and said, housing is what helps break the cycle of poverty. It's just one thing, but it's a very important thing, right? And again, I grew up playing year-round sports, and I had some incredible coaches. And one of them was my dad. But so immediately out of college, I was playing very high-level ice hockey, still semi-pro, and I started coaching at Berkeley. And I just realized, I'm pretty good at this. I really enjoy it. I enjoyed it, right? I enjoyed passing on what I had been taught, because I was fortunate to have some of the best. I never had a bad coaching experience growing up in any of my sports. And I played year-round sports, and all the way into college and even semi-pro. And so I felt like, okay, now I got to give that back. And I've always coached sports that I'm passionate about, because it helps me give back the things that aren't necessarily sports related, but like life skill related, right? And so now my youngest daughter is playing high school basketball, and they got rid of the coach after last season, and I've been coaching basketball out here for 15 years, AAU and CYO. And I'm passionate about giving these kids an experience that will help them become better citizens, not necessarily better. I don't care about basketball so much, and I tell them that. Yeah. Right? My whole focus on these kids is be a better athlete, because you can be an athlete for the rest of your life. Yeah. You might stop playing basketball next year, but you can be an athlete for the rest of your life. Right.
Well, that's so great, Dave. There's a couple things I have to connect around that. First of all, everybody calls you coach, and I actually didn't realize how actually accurate that is. The reason I thought they called you coach is because you have a lot to say about a lot of sports, and specifically cycling. So when I've ridden with you, you're lecturing us about the zone 2s and, all the metabolic issues and all kinds of things, but I didn't know how dedicated you were to it. But then this other connection, which is that I interviewed Reese on this podcast. It's actually the first episode. If you remember, he said you sat him down and gave him the keys basically to creating a resume, and that launched him into the ability to become a physical trainer for Cal Berkeley and actually get a scholarship to Cal. Do you remember that time?
I do. So I coached him. Okay, he was one of the kids I coached in ice hockey when I was just out of college. So here's the funny thing: is we're essentially the same age, in the sense that I was only 4 years older than him, 6 years old at the most. But I was still in the throes of being, about being a really good hockey coach. But we just really connected. And then when he came to me, that he was the first person in my life, because I was young, that had ever asked for something like that. But I had already been in corporate America. I had already done 2 internships at a major investment bank in college. So, and then I was actually working in an investment bank after. So I was one of the few guys from Berkeley, of all my friends, that ended up in corporate America, in a very high level, intense corporate environment. And so, and I was also happened to be the only minority, right? And it's really, when you're Asian, you walk into an investment bank as all white people, you actually notice that, right? Definitely. And it's way different now, but back then you get the feeling like, oh, this is a different world. And you're hanging out with people who all went to Harvard and Yale and Stanford, and they've got legacy in the industry and at these colleges. And you're like, do I really belong here? So for me, having gone through all that, I was able to sit down with him and understand that that's what he was going to face as well, right? Being a minority, navigating through the sort of the business / corporate world. And so we sat down and I just said, look, you have to tell your own story. This is where you get to believe in yourself. You get to create who you want to become through this, right? And it's not like trying to smoke and mirrors, right? It's like, think of the best way that you can present yourself so that way people see you the way you see you. And that's the hardest thing that I think we all go through. And as minorities, because we're prejudged to a certain degree. And also economically, you're prejudged. I learned that when I graduated from University of Washington Business School, which is one of the top public business schools in the country. But it's public. And I was working in an industry that everybody went to Harvard and, Yale and Stanford and Wharton and all these other things. And so they looked down on me, even though I knew as much or more than they did.
Wow.
So I just told him, you have to overcome these hurdles. You can't let them stop you. But the trick is, do you go over them or around them, under them? What is it, right? Be ready to adapt, but also be proud of who you are, what you've done, and tell your story so that nobody can tell it for you, right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
man. I'm amazed at the fact that you were a hockey coach and that you took an interest in, Reese, but probably all your players at that level so early on. It must relate to your early experiences, I would imagine.
Sure. Oh, totally. Because growing up in poverty, your life can go sideways at any moment. It really can. And I've had people in my life who sort of, I always call them the bumpers in the gutters at a bowling alley, right? For the little kids, they fill up the air bumpers and make sure you don't throw the ball in the gutter. Well, that was my early life, right? My life could have gone sideways at literally at any moment. The stuff I was doing, the things I was getting into, some of my choices of friends. And there were people who were at the right place at the right time for me personally. And the biggest thing that I realized they did is they were looking out for my best interests without any expectation of return.
Wow.
They never expected me to be President of the United States. They never expected me to be a millionaire or any of that stuff. They just wanted to keep me out of jail, right? And keep me alive. And that's the best thing is they were doing these things without any expectations. It's really hard to find people like that in your life. It's like when you lend money to somebody. I've lent money to a lot of people. I've given people places to live when I own apartment buildings, and I didn't expect anything in return. It's like, I always tell people, don't lend money because it's like gambling. You can't expect to have it again. You can only lend something that you don't need.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. That's great advice. And I see how passionate you are about service to other people and how much that really enhances your life. But of course, it certainly affects other people's lives in connection to that.
That goes back to cycling. When I talk about this, is cycling out again, growing up in the flats in the ghetto. a bike allowed freedom. I used to ride my bike before school with friends with our school backpacks up into the Berkeley Hills, and we'd go trailing all through like Sido and all those golf course, because they're illegal. So you do them first thing in the morning when there's no rangers or anything, right? Or no university cops even. And then we would literally ride back down to school. So I've been riding a BMX bike since I was 8 years old. And I bought my very first bike with my money from a paper route. And then it got stolen, and I was crushed. But I had I'm not getting it back, so now I got to go. And that was a hard lesson to learn, but I had to go save more money, right? Buy another bike, and this time, never let it go. But
that's amazing.
And so that's why I also, we had, again, Owen and I are laughing. We all have this mutual friend, Freddie, who's an ex-pro cyclist, and I run his foundation, the Fast Freddie Foundation. And our whole mission is to get lower income kids, underprivileged kids on bikes. And we do it by raising money. We buy brand new bikes out of the box. We take them to the housing projects. And it's all, obviously the kids have been pre-selected, so we know the right sizes and everything, colors and stuff. But we have the kids build their own bikes. So they become, efficient at maintaining them and things like that. And they have a little bit of skin in the game. But if you just build a bike and give it to a kid, it's the old, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach him to fish, you feed him for life. And so that's our philosophy. It's like, look, let's give these kids some true independence, right? Let them understand the value of a bicycle by having them build it themselves. And then they're free to go wherever they want because they're not scared of it breaking on them. They know how to fix it, right? And so that's just freedom, and it's freedom to explore your world.
What was it like for both of you growing up in Berkeley?
I was actually born in Berkeley, but it was just very cool in that time period in the 70s and 80s growing up. I mean, going to the university with Dad after hours. I liked the city a lot better then because it was more of a smaller city. Now it's getting bigger. I mean, with all the new students coming and whatnot. But I mean, I love Berkeley is like my home. And so I'm happy I'm still here in Berkeley, and Mom and I are still staying strong in Berkeley. My sister's left, and I'm a little, I get a little mad at them, because even Dad left us. Dad went, got a better offer down in San Diego, and he went down to UC San Diego, and Mom and I we are Berkeley through and through. I love the community. I love the city. I've been fortunate. I mean, we grew up probably lower to middle class. And so we're up here in the hills, and we were really fortunate. Dad made it very clear we were not rich kids. My parents are divorced as well, but it's just really cool living in the hills and seeing the views. That was Dad's prerequisite, was to have a view of trees or the bay or the bridges and whatnot. So when he moved to San Diego, he had to buy a house that had a view of the ocean or some trees or something. But I just have always loved Berkeley. I mean, I still do. I mean, obviously there's a great food, and then as a cyclist or even as a hiker or a walker, you just go to Tilden Park. It's a little slice of Europe, I mean, I was talking to Miles Perkins when he had done his Spain trip. And I was like, I'm dying to get over there. And he's like, but Wildcat Canyon is just like Europe. And so when I ride out there now, I'm just like, he's really right. It's just really beautiful. I mean, it's just a really cool city. So, I mean, I love the vibe here still to this day,
Yeah, the location is pretty stellar. I mean, I think we all sort of... I think I pinch myself all the time for just being in the Bay Area in general, and the weather and riding through the hills. And so, yeah, the location itself and the locale is amazing. And then, of course, we had a city that was sort of a small city, but an urban sort of hub. So there's lots to appreciate about Berkeley. What do you think, Dave?
Oh, totally. Like when I was in the Key Club in high school, we went to the national convention, and the Kiwanis sponsors that were with us, the adults, told us Berkeley is an island. That's what their exact words were. Berkeley is an island. We're going to the middle of the country. You guys are going to be the only minorities at the convention, and you may face racism, even though this is the Kiwanis clubs, which are supposed to be philanthropic and everything else. So they said, just be prepared and open-minded, and see and get what you can in a positive fashion from the experience. And it was exactly that, And so you come home and you realize, wow, we're really fortunate. And I think the biggest thing for me was the sort of the multiracial part of it. Like, I didn't have any Asian friends growing up. Really, I mean, I played basketball in these Japanese leagues, so I knew a lot of Asian people, but they weren't like my peeps. I didn't date an Asian woman until I married one. And because in Berkeley, and then like my sisters didn't marry Asian guys because nobody cared, right? And so it was just one of those things where, like, my best friends are all races, and they always have been. And so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't see skin color. Like, no, I see skin color, but I don't make any judgments about it because we were forced to grow up in an area where people of all ethnic persuasions are great people, and open-minded, just like us. I mean, again, obviously everybody has quirks as individuals, but we were exposed to people every race, religion, everything. I mean, I think Berkeley High, when we were growing up, was the first high school to have a gay club, right? That openly gay people and have their own club. And nobody hated on it. Everybody's like, oh, great, these are great people. Nobody cares if they're gay, right? It doesn't matter.
There was Chris Reynolds that got his ass kicked every day in my class.
Yeah.
And that's why I stayed in the closet until 26.
Wow.
Wow. Because, see, we didn't, but see, again, when I was there, the gay people, they were all part of the PAD group, the Performing Arts Department. And everybody sort of assumed if you were a guy in PAD, you were gay, even though not all of them weren't. There was a few that were like so we call them flammable, right? They were like flaming gay, and it's like, dude, you're not hiding that. But everybody thought that's great. That's their personality. They're performers, right? Yeah. Their whole life is about performance, but they weren't in the closet. And a lot of the girls, same thing. They were openly gay, and nobody ever thought anything of it. They really did, And like I said, my best friends growing up were black, and then they were white, and to this day, most of those guys are still my best friends.
Yeah. So hometown friends make sense to you, even.
Yeah. Well, here's a hometown friend story. I was living in LA with another hometown friend from up here. I met him. We ran across each other in the gym in Berkeley. I said, "Hey, man, what are you doing these days?" He said, "Oh, I'm about to move to LA." I said, "Hey, funny thing, me too. What are you gonna do?" "Oh, I'm gonna go down and try to be an actor." I said, "Hey, funny thing, me too. Let's live together." So we live together.
Nice.
So we're living in LA together, and I'm walking through my apartment building, and I'm like, "Mike Blake, what the hell are you doing in LA?" And he's like, "Oh, my girlfriend Cecily is the building manager." I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me?"
Oh my God.
So I hook up with Blake in LA, right? And and then another buddy of ours, Dave Singleton from up here from Berkeley High, was always coming down to hang out with us. We were just having the best time. And then so when we all moved back to the Bay Area, they had already done the Alphabet Soup and Mingus Among Us, all this different stuff. And so that's when we formed with Martin Reynolds, who I didn't know at the time, but got to know really well through the process, is Bob City. And so, we've got our album, and it was a fusion of all those musical things that those guys had done in the past. And again, we all knew each other tangentially, but I knew Blake, the best of all those guys. And because of Blake, and from my business background, I helped them produce I became the producer on the record and all this different stuff. So it was a lot of fun, but it was just that hometown feel. Like, we were instantly friends. And then to this day, we're all really tight.
I love that. That's exactly my experience with those guys. Actually, it's so funny. I didn't know that you had all those connections because I'm connecting with those guys. And of course, jazz and hip hop in the 90s was on fire. I mean, we literally, the scene in San Francisco was amazing, right? I think I went out 6 nights a week just to see live hip hop and jazz. I didn't know that you produced those albums, or were connected to those guys. But that is like a crew, like the loose connections, yet the instantaneous friendship that comes from having that familiarity with folks. And then also the ability to sort of accept that if you're from Berkeley or you went to Berkeley High, you just start by being tight right away. The trust is already really high, and it feels like you're part of the same tribe or something.
Totally, you are. That we all bring something to the table that's unique and fun and interesting. And it's not 100% of the time, but it is there, and that's how we can all vibe, right?
Yeah.
And that's Berkeley. When we all grew up there, Berkeley was a small town. It's a little bit bigger now, but it's also a little bit different now.
Totally.
It's not that much bigger, really, because the university hasn't grown that much. People think that, the university is expanding, it's huge. So he was like, it actually hasn't grown that much. The enrollment is still very similar to what it was when we were growing up there. But the culture of Berkeley has changed.
For sure. One of the cultural experiences of Berkeley that I want to talk to Owen about is music, right? And jazz in general. Owen, maybe you could talk a little bit about being a part of the music scene at Berkeley High. And of course, how did you come to become a trumpet player in general? And what was your experience with friends through the music scene?
Yeah, I mean, all my friends today are all musicians and cyclists, but a lot of musicians. But,
and some are both.
Right, exactly. The great thing about Berkeley, still to this day, is it's so musically rich, and I have like a new student right now that's come from Canada. His dad's on a sabbatical, and the mother's just like, it's crazy here in Berkeley. I'm like, it's just a great music scene, and it goes all the way down to the middle schools and the elementary schools. So when I was growing up, I picked up the trumpet. Like, it's still the same today. At you enter your third grade in the summertime, you choose your instrument, and it was a little more free back then, so you could just pick any instrument. Nowadays, they go through these protocols and they play all these different instruments and they decide, but then the teachers help you decide. Whereas I wanted to play trumpet, so I played trumpet.
Right.
There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Although in the 8th grade, Charles Hamilton forced me to play the euphonium baritone, and I really did not enjoy that at all. So I learned, but at King, so I had Charles Hamilton from 7th grade all the way through high school. But he wasn't the jazz guy just yet. Phil Hardiman was still around. And so I actually got to interact with Phil Hardiman in the 8th grade at King Middle School, and he would do the jazz bands, quite early in the morning. And so I got kind of immersed in that. My parents, I'm adopted, just putting out there, and my biological parents are both musicians. They met at New England Conservatory, and I was conceived somewhere out there in Boston, and my biological mom came to Berkeley because her brother lived here, and they got in a fight, and then she was homeless, and then one of my dad's colleagues picked her up, because it was back in the 70s, you could pick something right off of the telephone pole, and she needed a job. She was homeless. And so my mom couldn't have babies, so then my dad's colleague called him and said, we have a really pregnant woman at our house. My older sister was already adopted. Do you want another kid? And they're like, yes. But anyway, so because of the music background, my mother was hell-bent that I was, of all the 3 kids, was going to be a musician. And it was going to hell or high water. Like, I tried to quit one day, and my mother's white, but she was a probation officer in Richmond, and so she went all black mama on me when I tried to quit. It was hilarious. But I mean, in my soul, I didn't feel like I wanted to quit. I was cycling at that point, and I just wanted to go outside and be on my bike and be with my friends on my bike, because no one was really a musician. I didn't really have musician friends. When I got to Berkeley High, I mean, I was a pretty shy kid anyways. I knew that I was gay. I didn't want to tell anybody, so I didn't tell anybody. I think my parents had suspicions. My sisters had suspicions, but I didn't know they had suspicions. So I just remained very quiet and in my own tiny little corner in my little bubble. And I got into the jazz ensemble. It was terrifying. Unfortunately, my experience, I was in the jazz ensemble that had all the great superstars. Josh Shedroff, who is now Josh Redman, Dave Ellis, Ben Ball, Jeff Lipton, Jode Shelbred, the trumpet players were all big jazzers, and Hamilton didn't really run the band. He let the band run it, which was basically Dave Ellis, Jeff Lipton, and Josh.
Lord of the Flies.
So I got picked on because I was the classical player. So they would go down the row and they're like, Owen, play your line. And so I play it and it was fine because I'm classically trained and classical players go home and practice. So right. They could pick on me. It felt so shitty, but I always had my part in order because I was trained to practice. So I'd go home and practice, and I had a drill sergeant, kind of a mom, that you're going to practice, and so like, you're not going out till you practice. So, so it wasn't really a great experience. So I only realized this in the last couple of years, hanging out at Jeff's taco, that little taco truck thing, right, at his place. Megan do. So I was down there, and Jeff's mom was there, and Martin showed up that day. And so what's crazy about the connection is that I didn't know that David knew Martin, because Martin was kind of my protector at Berkeley High. Whenever I was in trouble, Martin always seemed to be nearby.
Really?
So I never really got my ass kicked because Martin was always somewhere. I don't know. And I ran into him after school, after high school, and I was on BARD, and I was like, there's Martin. So it was really cool. Martin showed up that one day. I was like, holy shit. Fucking there's Martin. That. Yeah, so it was really cool to reconnect with him. But I only played 1 year in there. And I remembered that it was too intense for me. I couldn't be around that kind of vibe. It was really negative for me.
So it sounds like you didn't really have a lot of the jazz band friends, because that group was tight. I mean, that crew was super tight. All those guys are still very tight today, but it sounds like you felt like on the outside of that crew.
I was always on the outside, and the reason why I'm so incredibly fond of Jode is because he was the guy that never treated me that way. I mean, he was always nice to me in the hallways. He was always nice to me. And we were roommates here where I live right now. Where I'm sitting was his old bedroom.
No way. So when he lived at your house?
Yeah. It's an in-law apartment, and it's the length. Unlike some of the in-laws up here, it's the length. You've got the whole square footage of the upstairs, minus maybe a little bit. So it's a pretty big space. So there was a wall put in, and so he lived on this side, and I lived on the other side when he was at Cal for his first year. Then he went to join the fraternity. Yeah, and that's when we lost contact. But he was always the nicest guy. So he was the one I connected with there. But none of the trumpet players. Dave Sacheray, I don't know if you remember that name. He's a year ahead of me. He graduated, I think, in '85. He was always real nice to me because we grew up before Berkeley High, so we knew each other then. But we go way back to when I started playing the trumpet. This guy, Bob Chacona. I
remember Mr. Chacona.
He was the absolute. I think he's the whole reason. He and Hardiman are the reason why, still to this day, that Berkeley is so successful musically. I mean, Chacona was that one guy that went to every frickin' school. Yeah, I mean, it's when it's a little suitcase, and he'd go to every single middle school all over the place. So he introduced me to my first private teacher, who was like the big teacher in town. And then because my parents divorced, I was put into a underprivileged Cal program called the Young Musicians Program in the 8th grade. And that's when, and then my trumpet teacher, then I left the other trumpet teacher, went to a new one, and she was adamant about no marching band and no jazz. So she could have been, but that was 8th grade. So I'd already gone through the jazz bands. I played in the lab bands, and then I played in the ensemble. And then, and even at that program, the jazz people were, I think Josh was there. That's where I met Ben Ball was in there too. And Ben Ball was my high school bully in the Cal practice rooms. Turn off the light and just awful. Like I don't want to see him.
Totally.
Like I would still be terrified. I mean, he was a big, strong guy, and I was this scrawny little kid, and it hurt. That was the year where every competition we showed at, we just won. Like people showed up.
Yeah.
High, sir. Yeah. Kind of like David with your coach and your basketball team. We don't want to go against Berkeley High. I mean, Berkeley High jazz was just too good. I mean, it still is really good. We kind of lost it. Charles retired. Mm-hmm. Sarah Klein interviewed for the job, but it was a two-for job where it was choir and jazz. And Sarah was Sarah and went in there. I don't know anything about choir, but I'm the person you want for the jazz program. They hired a choir guy instead. And the program just took, I had a bunch of private students in the band, and it's barely as a heartbeat. And so we, parents and teachers, just kind of organized, like, we don't want anybody fired. We want assigning, like, let's move, I can't remember his name, over to a middle school or out of the, right. And then Berkeley High just kind of changed it, so it was just the jazz director, and then they hired Sarah Klein, 2 jazz bands, barely alive. We had the ensemble and a lab band that had half of 2 trumpet players.
Wow.
And then now we have 5 jazz bands.
Yeah.
So
it's at the top again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sarah Klein is
right. It takes somebody like you, Owen, right, who went through it, but still passionate about it and could give back, but also help reestablish the culture.
Yeah.
Right? That's the key. It's the culture. And, and that's what sports is about. It really is. And ultimately, that's what life's about. Right. Because your friendship network, your tribe is your culture. Right? You can be a culture of jerks, or you can be a culture of really good people.
Right.
Right? And the thing about a culture of jerks is they're like rats in a cage. They'll eventually start eating each other. Right?
Yep.
Because it's all about who can last the longest, who can be the biggest, who can be the baddest. And it's not even that you're a bully, it's that you're only out for yourself. Whereas when you're with a culture of givers and caring people, you all become the tide that lifts the boats, right? You all care about each other. And you're willing to give a little bit to get something for the whole tribe, right? And to me, that's what sports is about, but also that's what friendships are about. Because there's phases, right? Where you're in a phase in your life where you really need to take from that friendship. You need to draw off those bank deposits because emotionally, psychologically, whatever it is, you need to draw down that account a little bit. But as soon as that's done and your friends help you through that, you start to try to replenish it in some way, shape, or form, whatever it may be, right? It's like for us when we ride our bikes, we take turns buying each other coffee. We can all buy our own coffee. It's not a problem. But or beers, but we always go, well, I'll buy. You bought last time, I'll buy this time, or I bought last time, but I'll buy again because I have my card out, whatever. Nobody's really keeping track. It's sort of like, okay, the only person who never buys is Joe. Joe's funny. Joe looked at us, and goes, "Hey, can you order me this? Hey, can you order me that?" Right? But see, here's the thing about Joe. But Joe will give you the shirt off his back to help you around your house. He'll lend you his car. I have tools of Joe's that I've had for 2 years, power tools that he's lent me. He's going to help me do some work around my house. He's helped Owen. Refuses to take anything for it.
Yep.
But, so when he helps me, he's got to drive his big old giant truck all the way out to Danville. His gas alone is 20 coffees, right? So I have no problem buying Joe anything, right?
Yeah,
beers, coffee, food, lunch, whatever. Because it all comes back to each other, right? It's circular, really is. And it's instead of a death spiral, it's more of sort of like a positive tornado where everything's being lifted up, right? You're taking all this debris of all our lives and making something whole out of it, right? Yeah. And so that's really what it is about friendships, I think, with all of us. We all bring something different to the table, and we all appreciate each other, though, 100%. And we all show it in different ways.
Well, I love that you're sort of really talking about what friendship is and how it works well and how it works best. I'm curious about your hockey experience, but I want to actually read what you both said about what sort of describes friendship, how you think of friendship. Dave, you said the best experiences that I've had are the events and travel that I've shared with friends. And you have a saying that a real friend you can trust with your money, your life, and your wife. Do you want to say anything more about that?
That's how I judge my friends, right? I mean, not necessarily judge, but say qualify or look at somebody like, who am I going to let into the core of my being? Because we all have a core who we are, and we have this shield around us that we sort of fend off the detritus in our life. People come in and out, whatever it may be. You have no control sometimes, and you just don't like people, or they don't like you, whatever. Yeah. But again, I have close friends, the people that I really want to spend my time with, because our time on this earth is limited, with the people that I can trust wholeheartedly to look out for my well-being, and not necessarily my families. I don't expect anybody to take care of my family, but know that if I said, hey, you know what, I got to take off, hold my money, it's going to be there when I get back. You know, even if they're broke, they're not going to spend it. Hey, man, my wife needs a ride to the hospital. I'm out of town. Can you do it? With a drop of a hat, my friends would say, I'll be there. Right? And I was like, dude, you know what? I need a ride to the hospital. Can you take me? I'll be there. Right? And those are your friends. And again, it's just this wholehearted trust that they will look out for your well-being. That's all it comes down to. Again, without expectations of anything in return.
Well said. And I will tell my own little story. When I was teaching my son to mountain bike, I took him down Cinderella, and I went first. And so I just sent it. And then he came back, and and then I heard, I sort of waited for him, and I heard, Dad! And I went back up, and he had gone over the handlebars and hit, full face into a tree. His busted lip was all bloody. His face was I didn't know how bad it was. When I walked him out into the street, though, and, it took us about a half an hour, I called my hometown friends. I called Ivor Brown, and because Chrissy was out of town, my wife, and he came right over and got us and took us to the hospital. And then I called my other hometown friend to come pick us up. And, to your point, those were the kind of friends that will just drop everything when something's really going wrong with you. And I always remember that. And so does Ellery. Yeah,
exactly. Right. I mean, and that's what life's about. It's not about how much money you make, or a lot of times people won't even remember how much money you lent them or whatever. Right. But because those things ultimately aren't that important, but that kind of stuff is big, right? Like, that's funny. In the biking story, we were recording this. We were in Daly City at Digitool's recording studio with Bob City recording our album. And Charles Campbell, another hometown friend of ours, was up on Mount Diablo on his bike. He's still cycling to this day. He rode in high school with us, was coming down, and some lady was coming up in the wrong side of the road, and he smashed into her car, went, of course, destroyed his bike, went flying into the hillside, luckily, and not over the side, and called me and said, hey, can you come get me? I'm laying on the side of the road, and I was, but we're in the middle of the recording session, and I was like, one of us will be there. We're in South San Francisco. He's up on Mount Diablo. And it was Dave Singleton who took my car and drove Charles out there, picked up Charles, and took him to the hospital. Right? Wow. So, I mean, we're a long ways away. But, again, you still do it, right? I mean, you drop everything. Yeah.
That's the loyalty, I think, that we're, one of the questions that I had on the questionnaire that I gave to both of you is, do you feel like there's more loyalty to your hometown friends than others? And people answer it differently, but I think that's one of the things that you're saying, Dave, is that when you're part of the same place, when you're from the same place and you have these long-standing relationships, it's critical that loyalty is something that's extremely palatable. It makes sense to me that the loyalty is almost higher, even though we're loyal to all of our friends. Maybe there's something more like family, right? There's something more like, I got to drop everything for that kind of person, that kind of friend. Do you agree?
Oh, totally. And a lot of it, because Berkeley is still a small town and there's only one high school, you're almost forced, you'd be surprised when you look in a yearbook at Berkeley High, even though there's next to 1,000 people graduating, you actually know almost all of them. Yeah. And you may not know them well, but you know them. You know of them, right? And you run across
them. You see their faces, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But growing up in a place like Berkeley, which allows those kinds of really close-knit relationships to germinate, and to blossom, you can't get that a lot of places. And you can't get that as an adult. Because as a child, your perspective on life is so different than when it is as an adult. And you don't have time. Like when you're a kid, we would spend every day after school together on our bikes. You don't do that as an adult. But we laugh because, on the weekends, we'll spend 5 hours together on our bikes, me, Owen, and Jode, and Jesse, and different guys. And our wives are like, what do you guys talk about? And we're like, stuff. Most of the time, I would joke with you, right? We just complain about our wives. But no, it's that, I actually end up talking to my buddies more than I talk to my wife or kids, if you think about the weekly length of time. Even though I see my family every single day, because we're all so busy, we don't really sit down and talk for 5 hours. But when we ride for 5 hours, there's hardly a minute where it's full silent. Unless we're like trying to kill each other up a hill or something. Well, we're not killing each other. Owen's killing us. We're chasing Owen. But otherwise, there's just a lot of chatter going on about any number of things. Because when you're with a group of friends, nothing's off limits. Right? Politics, religion, all that stuff. We just talk. And that's also how you basically stay fresh. Right? Keep your mind sharp because you're learning new things from your friends because on a daily basis, we're all seeing and doing different things. And it's really fun to come together for 5 hours on a bike and just free associate,
Especially when that loyalty is high and that trust is high and you have familiarity and you're already vetted, that kind of friendship is a unique thing, right? To be so comfortable with somebody, to be doing something together that you both, that everybody's passionate and loving and even suffering together it makes suffering way better, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And like you said, we're also familiar that we don't have to worry so much about each other's feelings. We can be open and honest. And again, you want to be diplomatic because you don't want to just diss on people, but you can disagree on stuff and just have really this sort of very open conversation. And that's very cathartic,
Agreed.
Because in our daily lives, especially like as a coach, right? I have to set the example for these young women. I can't drop F-bombs, right? I have to really think about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. And that gets tiring sometimes, right? Other times it's fun to just free associate with your buddies and just talk smack.
I love that. I think that's a great point about having trusted friends where you don't have to edit yourself or think about what you say, that everything is okay. And even if you make a mistake or you say something offensive, you have an opportunity to talk about it. Whereas in the regular life with with people that are not your tight friends, it could get a little dicey, right? People's feelings could actually get more affected and the impact could be greater. But to have that high trust, to have that familiarity, to be able to just be yourself, that's a real privilege. Yeah?
It really is. And again, I haven't known Owen, obviously, as long as I've known Jode, because also it goes back, Jode and I coach ice hockey together. We were actually the first coaches of the Junior Sharks program down in San Jose. Because it started in Oakland, and we were coaching this very high-level hockey team together. And then we we were asked to take it to San Jose and become the first Junior Sharks team. But because of that connection, and again, Joe and I had been through so much together, traveling together, playing hockey together, coaching together, all this different stuff, that when Owen came into our circle, it was easy to accept him. I felt like I'd known Owen all my life,
Exactly.
And so I think that's a lot of it. And we joke about, but having Asian parents is, helps too, because the Asian culture is a certain way.
Yep.
Right. And so when I get to pull my grumpy old Japanese man, he's looking at me like I'm dad. He's like, oh God, I've seen this before. I'm like, give me my whiskey. All right. So we can joke about stuff like that because, But
because you share some culture. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's not just because we grew up in a small town like this. Danville's a small town. I live in Danville. A lot of people from Danville who I run across as adults were born and raised here. And Danville's grown as well. But Berkeley is a different place because it's so multicultural, right? Yeah. That's the biggest thing about Berkeley. It's probably the most multicultural, connected city in the United States. Like New York is multicultural, but it's not necessarily connected because it's not a small place. There's not one high school. Berkeley High is one high school, right? There's the university, right? So there's this sort of openness of thought that comes with being in a university town. Like universities tend to be very liberal, even if they're in conservative places, right?
Yep.
And so having the university's influence on Berkeley is I don't think can be understated. But
I agree.
It permeates all the way through all the school systems, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the way down. And then when you get to Berkeley High, where we're all forced to go to the same school from the two different junior high schools, and then all of a sudden you meet somebody from a different, from the other side of town, the north side versus south side, but somehow they knew somebody in it, and the connections just start there, right? I mean, that's really what happens. It was the north side versus the south side, but it was never like the Sharks and the Jets kind of thing. It was like, oh, you live on the south side. Oh, so you know so-and-so. Oh, you went to Willard, so you know so-and-so. Well, you went to King, so you know so-and-so. And it was all good, right? It was all love. Yeah. And I think that's what's changed in Berkeley, is that feeling of it's all love versus now it's kind of a sense of it's all me. The whole me generation thing is still permeating Berkeley, I think, to a certain degree. It's not as bad as a lot of other places, but again, my sister's a teacher at Berkeley High, so she knows, she feels it.
I see. Well, I was gonna say just something about the Berkeley High mountain biking team, because I am one of the coaches, and I do feel like there's a lot of similarities and differences that are going on. But certainly one of the things that we're trying to do, on the mountain biking team specifically, is to create what you were talking about, Dave, which is a culture of acceptance, a culture of self-expression, but also a culture of taking care of each other and compassion, and also like really understanding marginalized people and understanding that there is privilege involved in being a privileged person who can actually afford a bike, and that these trails come from land acknowledgments that this land came from many other people have been stewards of this land, and so that we need to be stewards of this land and these trails. And so much about the curriculum, it's not about riding a bike, right? It's not about the skill set. It's all about the community building that I think is really important. Now, it may be unique to have this 100-kid sports team, which is the biggest sports team at Berkeley High, and have 40 coaches out there every Sunday, every Tuesday and Thursday. But we do have a curriculum that is, more about character building than it is about cycling. So I hope that that's part of it. I hope that we can contribute to, the us story of Berkeley that does help people take care of each other and do be aware and to be service oriented, because, all those coaches are volunteers. And we're doing the same thing that you talked about, Dave, so eloquently, which is to really contribute to people's lives. And then that actually is not just good for these kids, right? It's good for us.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's one of the uniquenesses, again, of growing up in Berkeley. Because the culture of Berkeley allows you to do those things. It allows you to become that person, essentially self-actualize, right? When you grow up in a lot of other places, there's so much stress just to survive. Just to get through the day, right? Safety fears, whatever it may be, housing fears. And again, Berkeley as a community is so supportive that it allows you to essentially become your best self. And a lot of cities don't have that. They really don't. I've lived all over the world. And I love big cities. I love the power, the vibe, the energy of big cities. But raising families in big cities is way different than raising them in a city like Berkeley. Because Berkeley's a world-class city. That's very special, right? Yeah. And it's because of the university. But it has very high standards in its school districts because of the university. And and it takes the people sort of, clearing the path for the next generation, which is you, which is me, which is Owen. We're all giving back somehow to the community, which is a funny thing, right? Who would have thought we would have all ended up doing what we're doing? I never grew up thinking I want to be a coach, right? I just felt like I was so fortunate to have these incredible mentors and coaches in my life that I was able to, pass that on. I mean, for me as a coach, one of my biggest excitement is when my kids I coach come back to coach, when they become coaches. And then I had a kid who was actually on the team with Reese, who he asked me to write his college entrance, recommendation letter. And and his dad came to me after a game one day and says, I don't know what you did to my kid. I was like, oh shit, here we go. He goes, all he can do is stop talking about how great you are as a person. Not as a coach, right? As a person. And to this day, the kid is now not a kid, obviously, but we still play hockey together as in the men's leagues. And he's one of my best friends, right?
That's amazing.
Because once you get to a certain age, now there's no longer sort of coach, but still, everybody calls me coach, right? Like I see Lex at the Sharks games. He still calls me coach, even though we're about the same age, because I coach him. He was on that team as well, right?
Wow.
And so all those guys that are, well, again, we're essentially the same age, but they all call me coach. So
that's great. Well, it sounds like you've had so much influence on other people, and I'm sure, and again, it goes back to how we all grew up and how we can appreciate what people have done for us and what friendships have done for us, right? I want to go back to what Owen said. Owen, you said the best experiences are going to concerts, bike rides, having beers, laughing, crying about any and everything. Someone is a friend if they always are there for you, regardless what's going on, good, bad, the ugly. You said they pass no judgments. That someone that tells you to get your shit together when you are off course. And a friend is basically family through and through. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what you said. It's beautifully written.
Yeah. So, I mean, because I've had a lot of trials and tribulations, and Seth Ducey, David's met. I don't know if you knew Seth Ducey, Chandler. He's a trumpet player, but went to Berkeley High. He's a couple of years behind me. I think he's in maybe 89, like a Jesse class.
Mm-hmm.
But,
okay.
He and then this other guy, we were in Oakland Youth Orchestra together. We went on tour, and so the three of us have remained friends since 1989. Wow. Seth and I met in all city, all county. But Chris, who is not a hometown Berkeley guy, but he's been one of my closest friends, and we were roommates in college. And when I was in college, my senior year, I was on my way to a gig early in the morning, and he was asleep in his bedroom and blocked down, just trying to cross a street. A car ran a stop sign and just plowed into my car, and I hit the left side of my face. And it was a hit and run.
Wow.
And so I got home somehow. There were a bunch of people, watching over the car that could move. But anyways, he immediately, awakened and took me to the hospital. And, but all that, he was the first person I also came out of the closet to. Like, we're on tour, we're in Europe on tour. All these girls are giggling, trying to get to Owen. And he's just like, what's up with this guy? Like, he can have any girl that he wants, and yet he has no girls. So in college, I came out to him, and it was really difficult. Like, a lot of tears were shed by me because I was just scared that I was going to lose, somebody that we were just starting this friendship. And we played in brass quintets together. We played in youth orchestras together. And every time a coach or a person comes after me, like in the brass quintet, there was and we were college friends. We're colleagues now, this trombone player. But he was so mean to me in this brass quintet. And Chris went up to him and backed him in the wall like, don't you ever talk to him that way again. We were all here trying to do the same thing. And he just almost put his finger up his nose. Then we're in youth orchestra, and we had a horrible coach who was screaming at us, this is the worst fucking trumpet section we've ever had. And he was picking on me. And then Chris again pushed this guy into a corner. And so and I we've been like to hell and back. And with the whole Berkeley High thing that happened, during the it was after the pandemic or something. He was always checking it. He's just always been my side. And Jode has been when I get hit by a car, during the pandemic, we were all on a bike ride. We split off. I called Joe, he's the first person I called, and his ass is right back to where we had split off, and so I'm just so lucky to have all these friends that will, come to my aid or, listen to my bitching and whining. I mean, like Chris has to listen and Seth has to listen to all the musical bullshit, right? I mean, because it's really, that's the crying. It's like you have this horrendous performance. You think you shouldn't be playing in this orchestra, let alone playing the trumpet. And that was really challenging. Like I had to talk about things that were really uncomfortable to me, but that's where he never passed any judgment. I mean, Joe just never passed judgment. David's never passed Jesse. I mean, just the list goes on. And I just feel like I can always rely on my friends, And it's not that I can't rely on my family, but it's just there's a different connection with friends where, I mean, there are things that Chris that I can't say in this podcast that Chris is just going to take to the grave.
Yeah.
And so there are just those friends that are just always there for you, where they're homegrown and hometown, and it's just you can always rely on these people to be there for you.
Yeah, well, good friends are good friends, no matter where they come from. No matter, just because I have a hometown friends podcast, I'm somewhat curious about that. But I do think that the quality of friendships are really what is so important about helping people progress in life. And we don't get anywhere without lots of different kinds of people. Dave, you were talking about your family and your community, and then all these friendships. And Owen, I know that you might have understated that first car crash. I know that was actually devastating to you. It almost ruined your professional career, right? I mean, it was a face injury, correct?
Yeah. We thought, I thought that was it. I thought that, I'm a senior. It's my last semester in college, and now I can't play the trumpet anymore. And it was devastating. It was traumatic. It actually created things that I don't really talk about anymore. It created panic attacks. I had never experienced a panic attack, and suddenly I'm having these heart palpitations. I'm panicking. I'm running into walls in the middle of the night thinking I'm having a heart attack. And Chris is living through this. We're roommates, and here's all this banging around because I'm like at a full-on not knowing I was driving my car. It created a lot of emotions that I didn't know existed, and having the friendships there, and I had the right teacher too, but it was devastating. We had to start over again.
Wow.
That was 1993, and I couldn't show myself publicly on a musical stage for it was 96. Yeah, 96, 97 was the first time people heard me play trumpet again. So it was a really long recovery.
Yeah, it is a long time.
Relearning, yeah. And there were a lot of people that stayed with me through that whole thing. And there were people that I did a recital at the conservatory as an alum. Like my teacher wouldn't let me graduate, so I had to stay an extra year. He's like, you don't have to take classes, but you have to take lessons. I'm not going to graduate you. Like he was the greatest teacher ever. Which was that he was super supportive, and I'm not going to let you graduate because that's not my job. My job is to teach you how to go get a job, and so I can't graduate you because you can't play a trumpet right now. But so I did this recital, and a lot of old friends came and heard that, and they all said, "Damn, I thought you were done." I was like, I did too. I thought I didn't think I was going to be on the stage right now playing for a bunch of people. My parents had written me off. My dad was just, because I did a senior recital, and it was bad. It was,
really?
And my dad, God, it was so hard. I still have the picture in my head. My dad barely limp handshake, like so disappointed. Like, wow, I can't believe that this is what you're going to go do right now. Like,
wow.
You're not going to make it, kid. You might want to go find something else to do. But that was because that was within 93, the accident happened.
Yeah.
Did our senior recital the December of the same year. January of 93 was the accident. December of 93, like I shouldn't have done it, but I needed to do it to graduate. So it was really traumatic, and having all sorts of friends, music friends and outside friends, just being there, and because it was horrifying,
It does make life just a little bit easier to have friends. I mean, certainly family is so important to a lot of people. In my life, I don't know what I would have done without the support of my friends. Like the cheerleading that went on, you know, people knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was in 8th grade. And I've told this story before, but like when I came back to Berkeley, I made a huge mistake. I had gotten into graduate school and I was about to start graduate school, and I went to a bar and I had a couple drinks and I got in a car and I got pulled over and I got a DUI, and my license got taken away and my car got impounded, and I went to the drunk tank and I was demoralized. I was as high as I could have been, you know, at the top feeling when I came back to Berkeley, and then I was at the lowest that I've ever been. And I talked to my boy, Dave Che, and I said, Dave, I don't know what I'm going to do, man. I got to get to graduate school. I got to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning every day. And I got no license and no car, and I got to pay for that shit. And he was like, I'll take you, Chan. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I'm a rower, and I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he showed up to my door for 9 months until I got my license back, and took me pretty much every day. And I asked him recently, like, why'd you do that for me, Dave? And he's like, Chan, I've known you for so long. I always knew you wanted to be a psychologist, and I couldn't let you down. And for me, man, I was like, you know, that's a hometown friend. That's someone who knew me, who knew how important that process was for me, and literally put aside, you know, his whole morning so that he could make sure to support me. And I don't know what I would have done without Dave Che. And of course, there are so many stories like that, you know?
Yeah. And that's, again, you don't get that generally as an adult, right? Because even if you don't necessarily have a family and all that stuff, it's just hard to develop those kinds of friendships later in life. That's why the hometown friends are so key in your life, right? Because they were there back then. Like, this is all the stuff that we're all talking about is when we were way younger, right? So it was before half of our life was even over in that sense, or half of what we are now, in other words, age-wise. Yet those people are still our friends to this day, because we all went through the exact same stuff like that when we were kids, and that bonded us for life. It really did, right? And
it's amazing.
And you just can't, you can't get that now, because people can't, as adults, the people we meet, they can't do that for us, right? They just can't. Right. I mean, like when we have neighbors one of the spouses has cancer, we get on a like a food chain for like a month, and one day a week we do it. There's no one person that can feed a family every night of the week. These days they're like, hey, just use DoorDash, dude. You can afford it, right? Yeah. But there's something different about telling, you know, even if they can afford it, there's something about somebody using DoorDash versus getting something from their neighbor. You know, I think there's way more, obviously, care and concern that comes with the food. Like Dave, he was just doing because his care and concern for you as a human being, right? It wasn't about you. It wasn't really about you making it to school. It was about you as a human being, and that's the kind of stuff that's why, to me, hometown friends are so solid, and you have to nurture those relationships for the rest of your life, because generally speaking, as we get older, we don't need that anymore, because we have other people. We have our spouses, our kids, whatever it is. Right. But we can never share those experiences, those bonding experiences with anybody else, because we all have them, right? I have them with the two closest buddies that I don't ride with all the time, I talk to all the time, you know, because we went through a lot of stuff together.
Yeah, you know? That shared experience is really important,
right? And we nurture them to this day. We all nurture them.
Tell me about that, Dave. Tell me about how you cultivate these friendships, or if both of you, if you have stories about how do you keep those going. And it sounds like you really value them, so it sounds like you really understand the value of cultivating them and keeping in touch and keeping those friendships fresh and current.
Well, you know, the biggest thing for me is that I didn't get married till I was 40. So I was able, and I was just me, and I had enough money that I could always go visit my friends. And so this is really before, you know, internet, and we had cell phones, but really it's not the same. So I could just fly at a moment's notice because of my career. I had a lot of time off. I could go visit my friends. So I spent my time and energy to go visit them, to be at their events, their kids' events, their family events. Because I was a single guy living in LA or in Hong Kong. I didn't need them to come see me, right? They could come down and we could party for a weekend or something, but that's just us being the guys again, whereas they had lives to live because they had kids, they had jobs. So I made it a point to always go to them, right? Wow. And go visit them and stay connected. I mean, personally, at that point, it's kind of a one-way deal, even though we talked all the time, but I was the one who was able to do that. So I just said, you know what? No sweat off my back. I'll fly here. I'll fly there. I'll show up. Cool. Right. Wow. And to this day, I still do that. My buddy in Seattle, his mom died of a heart attack. I jumped on a plane next day and just headed up there. Big deal. That's what you do. Yeah. And there's nothing I could do besides be there. Right. Yeah. I can't bring his mom back, but I could be there and maybe help around the house, run errands while he dealt with everything else and all the chaos from the family and everything else. Right. I could just stay in the shadows and just and do the sort of what I call the infrastructure stuff, right? Take out the garbage, wash the dishes, feed the dog, and just let him focus on the most important thing, which was, the family. So
it sounds like you really understood the value of friendship and that you've understood the value of friendship for a long time. I often say that, often people do take for granted these long-term friendships because we do focus on the current relationships that we have, or our career, or our family, or our children. Of course, going through, having children, it's like a tunnel, right? It's like there's so much focus on that time period. And then for me, once my children were launched, I sort of came out of the abyss a little bit and had a little bit more room to think about, like, how did I get here, and what do I want to focus on? And friends just came right back to my focus. And this is what this project is all about. For me, it's just a focus on these people and other people's stories about what matters to them, and friendships, from my perspective and my research and my work, is so much a part of what makes life worth living.
For sure. And again, right? Life throws at you responsibilities and things that you have to focus on at any given time. And the friendships, you nurture them, but not in the same way, right? Because you can't, once I started having kids and coaching basketball and all these things, I couldn't just fly off anytime I wanted, right? And so I still had to nurture it other ways. Thankfully, the internet showed up, right? Cell phones, texting, all that stuff. It makes it easier to actually stay connected to people.
It does.
It really does. And that's fortunate. And again, because the relationship's already established, just sort of nurturing them via Zoom or whatever it is much easier than trying to establish a relationship over the phone. It's like trying to work over the phone, right? Zoom calls. It gets really old. You just don't build that connection that you do sitting around a water cooler in a company, right? That face-to-face interaction, having lunch together, having coffee together, all these things that you do in person that you can't do when you're on a Zoom call. Well, now, because we've established this really strong foundation, we just have to talk. Right? Whenever we're in our car, we can just dial the friend up and just talk while you're driving. You can just make up, check in for the week kind of thing. And that's why we're fortunate, I think, in our generation, is because we established these real solid relationships before all this technology came on board. Now it's much harder to establish a relationship because your relationships are based on the technology.
I do think that the technology can make it easier to keep in touch with people. And it can, actually, the research says, if you use technology to connect with people in certain ways, it can be really beneficial and help with well-being. But if you have the illusion that that's the only way that you can have a friendship, then that's an illusion. That's not the way we as human beings connect with people. And we have to be somewhat flexible in our understanding and maybe to learn how to use these pieces of technology to actually have real relationships. Would you agree?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, that's the thing, right? With, like they always say, they do all the studies about like Facebook and Instagram. People only put good stuff, right? It's the FOMO thing. They want everybody to think that life's all perfect and hunky-dory. And life doesn't work that way, right?
Nope.
And so, again, I think, not only did we grow up at a certain time, but we grew up in a certain place. that fostered those relationships cross-culturally, like, you know, the music department hanging out with the jocks, right? It's like Glee, that TV show Glee, right? Where the jock is in the musical theater group or whatever it is. I mean, but that's Berkeley, right? And Berkeley has spawned some really incredible athletes and musicians, right? And so, again, it's just one of those things where it's okay to, Berkeley was a special place, it still is, where it's okay to be you, and you can build friendships based on the culture, not necessarily that, oh, I'm an actor or singer or I'm an athlete. It's that you're a human being. Yeah. Right. And so the city, the culture does its best to treat everybody equally. Obviously, it has its failures at times, but it tries. And so that's the idea, right? It's all about intent. There's no evil intent. Yeah. So, and I think we were just really fortunate to grow up with that. You know, it's so funny, Owen, your story about coming out is my best friend growing up, one of my best friends was Roger Daniels. And he went off to college. And back then, we used to write letters to each other to keep in touch. He was in Florida. I was in Seattle. And we literally write handwritten letters. And he would send me cassette tapes of, mixed tapes that he would make in Florida because he was going to all black school. So he was getting totally into the hip hop music scene. So we come back one summer and he's like, and we used to go skiing together and all this stuff. And he comes back, he goes, Dave, I have something to tell you. I'm thinking, oh crap, his dad or his parents are sick or something like that. He goes, I'm gay. And I looked at him and I'm like, you're just now figuring that out? Right? I'm like, Roger, I think everybody knew that but you. But no, so I looked at him and I was like, so? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me like, literally, I looked at him like, so? And he's like, he was just silent. He's like, and he's looking at me like, shrug shoulders. I'm like, Roger, it doesn't change anything. That's what you have to understand. Our friendship isn't based on the fact that everybody knows you're gay, but you've never come out, right? We've grown up as best friends. It doesn't matter, right? And so he was so shocked, I think, but he was also appreciative. But again, it was easy for me because we'd done so much together, right? We'd spent hours after school running together, traveling together, all this different stuff. And I was like, dude, doesn't matter to me. I don't care because that sounds sort of like off-putish or demeaning or whatever. But I was like, hey, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because you are who you are and I accept you for it.
Exactly.
Right.
That sense of acceptance is, that sense of acceptance for whoever you are, we all deserve that in life, right? That if we know someone not doesn't care, but actually accepts us for everything we are, that would make it a lot easier to come out to people in general. Maybe, Owen, you could tell us a little bit more about what that experience was like to come out to your friends when hiding it so much, because of course that is a pretty common experience, is that people, hide those real true parts of themselves, especially when they feel marginalized around it or, feel scared to come out.
Yeah, it's true. I was terrified. It was just like what David said, like, he's like, it doesn't change anything, which I was nervous because his family, he's from Vacaville, but his dad is kind of a white racist dude and homophobic. And so I was apparently the first gay person that his dad had met. So I was nervous telling him because I thought he was going to have that same foundation that his dad, because his dad's much older, of course, in a different generation. So it was really comforting. Like I still didn't know how to react, because you still think it's, this horrible thing that you're gay and you're broken and that sort of thing. Because, in the 80s, it wasn't a great time, right? We had Ronald Reagan who had deemed the disease HIV, the gay disease, and that's what we get. God had, that's the punishment. So it made it really difficult. And my buddy Chris was raised with the church, Catholic. So you just get super nervous. My mom was raised Catholic. My dad's Japanese, had no idea how that was going to go. it was, this guy, Chris Reynolds, who I mentioned, he was at Berkeley High, same grade. And I just remember in the courtyard, him always getting kicked around because he was obviously gay, So I was doing whatever I could to keep that hidden, even though people knew anyways. Like I was dating all the pretty girls, Chrissy Mears and all the pretty blondes. I was dating but nothing was happening, right? Right.
That's how they knew. You had all the hot chicks, but you wouldn't touch them. They're like, is it me or is it you? Oh, it's you.
Jeez.
So it was pretty funny, but it was hard to, I mean, I don't know when I told Jode. Oh no, I ran into Jode at Picante years ago, like in the early 2000s, and I was with my partner at that time, and so I was kind of like, who's that? Oh, so that's you just kind of like, well, that's my boyfriend. And of course Joe didn't give a shit, but I thought we'd gone to high school and there was going to be this whole fireworks, but there wasn't. So you keep running into these situations where everyone was really supportive. And so it was very comforting having friends that were like, yeah, nothing changes. You're gay. So who cares? It doesn't mean that you're not Owen anymore.
We lose him?
Or comforting just knowing you have these friends, that
Oh my God,
that don't judge you for who you are.
Well, that goes back to your definition of friendship, right? Is that we can feel like we have people in our corner that will not only not judge us, but again, it's different to not judge. Accepting us for whoever we are, all of our foibles, all of our, the good, bad, and ugly, as Owen says, right? Yep. That is a unique experience, and that doesn't even happen in families all the time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's where I think friendships, and I think specifically long-term connected friendships, can be almost even sometimes superior to families in situations, depending on the family, right? There are so many people in this world that don't have the kind of supportive family, but they have friendships that allow them to thrive. And that certainly was my experience in so many ways.
Yeah.
Dave, your experience with the Berkeley Iceland, I was curious if you wanted to maybe tell us a little bit about what it was like being at Berkeley Iceland. When did you start? I know, Reese said you were a couple of years older, so you were kind of one of the older cats, but you spent a long time at Berkeley Iceland and probably developed a lot of hometown friends there, yeah?
Oh, totally. I still talk to most of those guys to this day, via Facebook and texting and stuff. But my mom was going to night school across the street on Wednesday nights. So she would drop us off for free babysitting. Well, not free, but $1.50 babysitting. So me and my sisters would go ice skating, and even one of them couldn't even skate. She just had to sit there in the stands and watch the other three skate. So that's how I learned ice skating. I started going with a friend on Friday nights, and then in junior high school, actually ice skating was a popular thing to do for junior high school kids. And I started on Friday night. You'd always see the older kids come in to play ice hockey, because they practice at 10:45. They would do that. Like the high school kids practice at 10:45 on Friday nights, because basically it's to keep them out of trouble. Right. And so I said, you know what? My friend's like, hey, let's try that. I'm like, what is that? He's like, oh, that's ice hockey. I'm like, okay. And so we tried it, and he quit after like 6 weeks. And I was like, oh, I love this. But also the difference at Berkeley is that we had a lot of minorities on our teams. So we would play against teams where we were the only minorities. Like I played college ice hockey, and I was the only minority in the entire league. And you can't believe the racial stuff I had to deal with. But around here, you look at the team pictures from back then, and it was all minorities, right? Yeah. I mean, this is ice hockey, which is up until now has essentially been it's a country club sport, right? It's like golf or tennis. It's mostly non-minorities of all shapes and sizes, and so. That's how it all started, really, And again, I was really lucky. I had the best coaches, and one of the guys who coached me again, he's older than me, and I still play this senior hockey tournament with him up in Santa Rosa every year at, the Snoopy Senior Tournament. He runs a team, and I get to see him at least once a year at the tournament, and we play together, right? So and again, I just pass that down. Like I said, I skate with Greg Penny, right? And he's a guy I coach. So that's the community of Berkeley talking, because it's the sport of ice hockey, but it's really, again, about the community. Like I said, we all still talk. Joe and I played hockey together, and all those guys that I started playing hockey with way back then, we're still friends. Because the thing about ice hockey is we traveled all over the place to play.
Yeah, right.
And then we would go to these places like Marysville and Stockton and, and Fresno. And back then, there was no black people. There was no Asian people. It was us, and stuff that we had to deal with back then. It's an eye opener, really. But it bonds you, because it's like you have to circle the wagon, so to speak.
That's right.
And it's not the way you want to do it in an ideal world, right? But it's life. It happens, and it happened to us, and it was a great thing. And even like I said, when I was coaching those guys and I would take them places, I was like, hey, be prepared. You're going to get called names, right? Yep. Don't let it get to you, because they're doing it to get you out of your game. And again, I got the same kind of crap when I played in college, and I just didn't let it get to me, right? Wow. My whole thing is like, look at the scoreboard. We're winning, right? That's all that matters. It's a game. We're winning. That's all that matters. Hey, guess what? You don't like me because I'm a minority, but guess what? We're whooping your ass. How's that feel? Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I love that. Well, you guys, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I really got to know you guys over this, a couple hours. So it's been great to get to know both of you. But what would you say you admire about each other?
I love Dave's I love his passion for pretty much everything. And I had two sisters, never a brother, and so he's kind of like an older brother, and I can feel that he has my back, and he steers me straight too. I mean, I've loved the friendship that has been created thanks to Jode. But I mean, there's just I probably can't say enough, Dave, how much you've helped me just grow as a human over the 6-7 years or 4, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, it's very cool. It's really good to know people that know a lot of stuff, because you learn, and then he's a little older than me, so I get to see what he's done to steer his life and get right, because I'm single and I don't really necessarily have my shit entirely together. So I'm always looking at people that's got their shit together and what can I do to be a little bit better, and so I admire him for that. And plus he helped me with connecting to Mr. Freddie Rodriguez, who is now my cycling coach.
Wow. Something Owen said that I think is really powerful, and I think it's a real advantage to having friends, but in general, we learn stuff. We learn how to be human beings through our relationships, and I think specifically through our friendships. And, I love that's what you brought, here, Owen, is that Dave has taught you how to be a different person in so many ways. And I think that's a very common experience through all of our relationships, but specifically if we have high trust, loyalty, and connection to somebody we really enjoy being around, we learn how to be a person. A certain kind of person.
Yeah. And, I feel like it's a mutual admiration society, but I can say the way about Owen, right? I mean, it helps me be a better person. As an individual, you want to constantly be learning. You really do. And it's so much easier to learn from people you respect and care about. It just is, because you know them, and you know where their heart is, right? And so that's, to me, that's the most important thing in life, is you want to be around good people, right? It doesn't matter. There's rich assholes, there's poor assholes, there's black assholes, there's white assholes. There's no Asian assholes, just so you guys know, because I'm Asian. There's grumpy Asians, but there's no assholes. No, but I'm just saying, it's really important that the people you surround yourself with, because you do have the choice, they're good people, right? Whatever that means for you as an individual. And for me, it means people like Owen. That's really it, right? I don't need more friends. I honestly don't. But I like more friends. I don't, and I don't want more friends. But if I run across people who really move me as a human being, I welcome them into my life. And I just hope that I can reciprocate.
Yeah, I think there's always more room for good people in our lives, is to your point, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Well, you guys, thank you so much for spending, some time talking about this topic with me. I really appreciate the quality of your relationship. I really appreciate your wisdom. I really appreciate all your thoughts and how articulate you guys spoke about, this topic that I'm super passionate about, but it also sounds like I'm running into a lot of people that are also passionate about it. So I admire you both for the things that you have done. I've gotten to know you over this time, just, a little bit more than I had before. So maybe that's a selfish thing for me to be able to do a podcast to get to know people again or get to know them on a different level. But I really appreciate you guys sharing all of that with me and with any listener that is actually going to listen to this. So,
well, it's great being on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for listening to this episode of Hometown Friends. This interview with Dave Tom and Owen Miyoshi was a great example of the power and positivity of hometown tribalism. In this episode, we see that Dave and Owen both identify with their hometown of Berkeley, California, and have found that a deep and loyal friendship comes without actually having the long-term connections to each other that are usually responsible for the familiarity and comfort that often makes hometown friendships unique and significant. Because of their long-term connections to a mutual friend, they formed a fast friendship, which allowed them to share their passion for cycling, coffee, music, and giving back to their community. It was interesting to hear both Owen and Dave discuss their unique family backgrounds and their appreciation of the cultural diversity of a place where they grew up. It was interesting to hear Owen's experience of being adopted and then feeling like an outsider with his bandmates in the Berkeley High Jazz Ensemble, but then how one person from that group who went out of their way to be nice to him became a trusted friend many years later, and that was the person who introduced Owen to Dave. It was also heartening to hear about Owen's coming out story, his tragic car accident that almost ruined his music career, and the friendships that supported him through these challenges. Owen's long-standing passion for cycling connected him to Dave, and then a full transformation of his health and fitness. I also loved hearing from Dave about how growing up in poverty gave him the lifelong commitment to philanthropy, coaching youth sports, and how he consistently is motivated to help others because of the help he and his family received. Dave offers some real wisdom and thoughtful reflections on what makes a good friend and how honoring your friendships and valuing trustworthiness is the key to what makes these connections significant and worthwhile to cultivate. Although life has been challenging for both of these guys in different ways, they each discuss how friendships made a positive impact on them and how grateful they are for the friends that they've had in the past and for their current connections to each other. These guys show that hometown friendships are not only the people you grew up with, but can be new friendships with new people who are from the same place and that have similar and overlapping sensibilities, values, and seminal experiences. Hometown friendships have advantages and limitations. The advantages are clearly from the feelings of acceptance and the comfortable connections that are often experienced. And the limitations are usually in the area of misalignment or lack of acceptance for our developing self. Friends that offer us support, have time for us, keep in touch with us, and who appreciate all of who we really are in non-judgmental ways, they improve the quality of our lives. Friendships, like all relationships, are sustained over time and provide value to our lives based on the feelings that we get when we're in connection with these people. So when you think about the friends that we have and what we want in life, we should think about how we feel when we're around them. Because if they make us feel good about ourselves and we can trust them to have our best interests in mind, then it's a significant relationship that is worth cultivating and keeping. Likewise, when we offer our friendship to others, we should assess what type of friend we would want for ourselves or that we would want for our loved ones, and set our sights on developing an awareness of what makes a good friend so that we can be the kind of friend and person to others. If you have a friendship that you think is worth celebrating and you want to share the feelings that you have about this person, please follow me on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod. And if you want to continue to hear this podcast, please take some time to subscribe to my YouTube channel and feel free to let me know if you have a suggestion about a topic or a person you'd like to hear about. Thanks again for listening and stay tuned for the next episode of Hometown Friends.